Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Mr. Shankar Aiyar, a member of Rajya Sabha, but more importantly, a man who's passionately advocated panchayat Raj in this country and was the first Minister for Panchayat Raj until 2009. And the reason why we are talking to him today is that he's just concluded a report with far-reaching recommendations on how to make panchayat Raj institutions work on the ground. Welcome to our show, Mr. Shankar Aiyar. Now, can you just begin by explaining to us very simply as to what are the deficits in this panchayat Raj institutions that we've experienced in the last 20 years, since the 73rd and 74th Amendment, and what is it that your report seeks to do?
Let me begin not with the negatives, but the positives.
Positives, yeah.
The 73rd and 74th Amendments relate respectively to the rural local bodies, that is the panchayats, and the urban local bodies, that is the municipalities, the nagar palikas. Now, we have concentrated on the rural local bodies. What is the huge achievement? The huge achievement, to sum it up in 3 words, is that Panchayat Raj has been made ineluctable, irremovable and irreversible. You just have to have Panchayat Raj now. And in consequence of those mandatory provisions of the 73rd Amendment, we now have approximately 2.5 lakh institutions of local self-government in rural India, to whom we've elected about 30 lakh members, plus about 2 lakh in the Nagar Palikas. And of these members, amazingly, close to 15 lakh are women. Okay. There are more elected women in India alone than in the rest of the world put together. Okay. And to meet Dr. Ambedkar's objection that villages are cesspools of discrimination, we have built in reservation systems such that all of these villages where there are SCs or STs, we have reservations for them in proportion to their population in that panchayat area, and 1/3 of those seats are reserved from women of these categories, and there's an enabling provision for the OBCs. So the establishment of Panchayat Raj has been our biggest achievement, and our biggest failure is that we have failed to fill these vessels adequately.
And we failed to make it work the way originally envisaged, right?
We failed to make it work because nobody had ever had any experience of undertaking devolution of powers in such a large and complex country as ours.
Where the center and the states and panchayat, they all work together.
Absolutely.
So this new committee recommendation that you made actually lays down various ways in which these 3 entities can work together, and central funds of more than 2,50,000 crore can genuinely be devolved and seep down to the panchayat level, and they decide how they should work their welfare programs. Is that the crux of the whole issue?
To use a golfing term, you've got a hole in one there. You've really set it out exactly. Usually, Panchayat Raj is portrayed as a confrontation between these institutions of local self-government and the center and the state governments. And many legislators, ministers, bureaucrats believe that the panchayats are there to snatch away their powers. But the way you have explained it, most of the money that comes for social sector and anti-poverty programs comes from the center. And the main justification for economic reforms is that as a result of economic reforms, you generate so much more revenue for the government that you can expand exponentially the expenditure on these social sector and anti-poverty programs.
And in the last 20 years, we've seen the
amount. In the last 20 years, that has gone up by 25 times, from approximately 7,500 crore rupees to nearly 3 lakh crore rupees now. But, and this is the big but, what have been the outcomes of these increased outlays? Virtually nothing. Because where India used to be about 135 on the UN Human Development Index before the economic reforms process, today, 20 years later, we are still at virtually the same position. Like Alice in Wonderland, the faster we run, the more we remain in the same
So
place.
you're saying that the panchayat system is critical to improving our human development indices and critical to delivering all these central welfare schemes at the ground level. That's what you're saying, right?
At the moment, or rather for the last 20 years, almost all this increased expenditure on the social sector and anti-poverty programs has been by entrusting bureaucratic silos or registered societies set up by these bureaucracies
True, yeah.
to effect the last mile delivery. And the Planning Commission's instructions about bottom-up planning have largely been observed in the breach. In consequence,
And bureaucrats are controlling these funds.
in consequence, the local community has no sense of ownership, and all they are passive beneficiaries of whatever reaches them. And in the ward sabhas and the gram sabhas, the institutions of government there, which are the panchayats, cannot be held responsible because they say, all right, we'll convey your complaint to the BDO. They can do nothing about it themselves. But if instead of having these registered societies receiving the money or low-level bureaucrats being ultimately responsible for delivery, we were to embed these registered societies in the panchayat system, or at least have an organic link between them, then by definition, where a registered society or a bureaucrat cannot be held responsible by the local community, a panchayat by constitutional decree is responsible to the local community, and so the local community will feel this is my money and therefore it had better be spent properly, and if it isn't, then somebody had better explain. So we can only get effective local governance through effective local democracy. And we have combined, if you like, the constitutional order of the older democracies with Athenian democracy, where everyone was a participant. Because in the Gram Sabhas, absolutely every single adult voter is entitled by virtue of being more than 18 years old to be a member of that Gram Sabha. And because some of the Gram Sabhas are much too large, we now have evolved a concept of the ward Sabhas. So to explain it to an urban audience, and most of our audience is urban, you have resident welfare associations.
Exactly.
What are they? They are your panchayat. And you elect the office bearers, and you hold the office bearers responsible. And if your president or your secretary doesn't perform, you kick him out and you produce another president or another secretary. In exactly the same way, we are asking that, well, like, you get your neighborhood run effectively by a good RWA. Let rural India have the opportunity of getting effective governance by being responsible themselves for that governance.
Sure. We'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Mr. Shankar Aiyar on his new recommendations, which an expert committee has come up with on how to make India's panchayat system work effectively. Now, Mani, can you explain to us simply as to, in the new dispensation, if all your recommendations are to be accepted, how will the coordination and cooperation, as it were, between the panchayat, state and the center, how will it work? If you can just explain to us with the help of a current example of some welfare scheme which is being delivered half-heartedly today.
Good. Thank you for that opportunity. We begin by unbundling the activities relating to any particular scheme.
Right.
Let's take the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, which is the single biggest scheme of the central government. When we unbundled the activities, we discovered that there are 347 activities that have to be
within
performed
Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan.
within the SSA. There are 347 different things that needed to be done. And of these 347, we discovered that something between 250 and 300 have to be done at the central level or the state level. It cannot be done below. And what we did was we took the remaining activities, that's something like 70 or 80 of them, and applied what is called the principle of subsidiarity, which holds that anything that can be done at a lower level should be done at that level and no higher. And reciprocally, that anything that needs to be done at a higher level should be done at that level and no lower.
It can be at the state or the central.
This applies to the center, the states, to everything. But what we have done is we already applied the principle of subsidiarity when we decided of these 347 activities, about 100 activities to be done by the center and 200 activities to be done by the state. We are left with 50 or 60 activities. And then we said, what can be done at the village level? Do it there. What can't be done there, can it be done at the intermediate level, at the block level? We said, do it through the block panchayat. And then what remains, we said, should be done at the district level. We attribute that to the district panchayat. And this is technically called an activity map. Why an activity map? Because you cannot devolve an entire function.
Right.
In every single function.
It's a bit like a division of labor.
Yeah,
right?
It's a division of labor where you say...
Between panchayat, states and the center.
That's right. You say that, so this activity map of the different activities then indicates to you that to perform these activities at the district level, this is the share of money that must go to the district level. And to perform these activities at the intermediate level, this is the share that must go to the intermediate level. And to perform these activities at the village level, this is the amount of money that must go there. And that with regard to each one of these levels of Panchayat Raj, you have the functionaries also devolved to the disciplinary control of the district, the intermediate and the village panchayat respectively. Right. Can I illustrate this with another very clear example? Yeah. It is from the roads of India. Our roads fall into 5 categories: the national highways and the state highways. These are obviously the responsibility of the national government and the state government. Then you have 3 other categories of roads: the major district roads, MDRs, the other district roads, the ODRs, and then the village roads or the VRs. And our map would say that the village road and the village level, the village link road, should be made by the village panchayat and maintained by them. The other district roads, which link more than one panchayat, should be made and looked after by the intermediate panchayat. And the major district road, which covers the whole of the district, should be the responsibility of the district panchayat.
Intermediate panchayat will be Gram Sabha, right?
No. The Gram Sabha comes below all of these and is the legislative body. It's like the US Congress. It has to provide advice and consent.
Okay.
So these are the 3 executive bodies. Now these 3 executive bodies, you say, who are the functionaries? And you say to yourself, the superintending engineer roads must be under the disciplinary control of the district panchayat. The executive engineer roads should be under the disciplinary control of the intermediate panchayat. And the junior engineer roads should be under the disciplinary control of the village panchayat. And when it comes to the money, I give an example, is 100 crore. You can decide, and the figure doesn't matter, it's how it's divided. If it's 100 crore, you say, for roads, you come to the conclusion that 50 crore should go to the village panchayats, because in any given district, there are 50 panchayats per block. I'm giving an average, 50 panchayats per block and about 10 blocks per district. So therefore, about 500 panchayats.
Sure.
So to 500 panchayats, 50 crore. There are only 10 intermediate panchayats.
Yeah.
So to them, you give 20 crore.
20 crores. Yeah.
And then the remaining 30 crore, you say there's only one district panchayat, you give them 30 crore. So you've divided the activities, you've divided the functionaries, and you've divided the finances. And then you say, now go ahead and do your job. This doesn't exclude the state government, it doesn't include the central government.
And who does this remapping of the administration?
If it's a centrally sponsored scheme, it should be done by the central government. Now, if it hasn't happened so far, I don't think it's because of any lack of political will. It's largely because the bureaucracy feels, the central joint secretary feels, that it'll go out of his hands if there's not somebody like him running it at the bottom of the heap.
Correct.
And so he wishes to retain control over it. And if he has to give it out to somebody else, he gives it to a registered society that's responsible to him.
Yeah.
And then provides for token representation of the panchayats in that committee. For example, the school management committee. Now, the school management committee has representatives of the parents and it has representatives of the panchayats. But after the panchayat chap has gone there, whom is he going to report to?
Yeah.
Whom is he responsible to? And whom is the SMC responsible to? It's responsible to some undersecretary in the State Education Department, who in turn is responsible to the Joint Secretary in Shastri Bhavan.
I want to ask you something here, Mani. You're very right when you say that 2,50,000 crore of centrally sponsored schemes are controlled by bureaucrats, and the money is lying in SPVs and cooperatives, etc., which the bureaucrats are controlling. Now, there's a history to why this has happened. The history being, about 10, 15 years ago, when the state finances were very poor, it was felt that the states will not use the funds earmarked for a particular purpose. So they would take the money for roads or whatever, for education, start paying salaries for their employees, and as a result, the money will not go towards the purpose that was earmarked for. Now, today that situation doesn't obtain. Today state finances are in reasonably good shape. So this whole system of centrally sponsored schemes and this cooperative societies and SPVs, don't you think they have to be dismantled forthwith without any, whether even before waiting for your panchayat raj recommendations to fall in place, don't these have to be dismantled?
This falls outside the ambit of my report. I'm sure there is scope for increasing the exercise of responsibility for anti-poverty programs and social sector programs by the states. And if they exercise it, there's nothing in the CSS to stop them.
Yeah.
They can always add to any program. They can have their own independent programs. The point is that when close to 3 lakh crore rupees, it's more than 250,000, it's close to 3 lakh crore rupees are being sent from the center, in which perhaps 2 lakh crore rupees have to necessarily stay with the central authorities or the state authorities. The remaining 1 lakh, which is going to these not cooperative societies but registered societies. Now the Raghunandan, my colleague, our principal consultant, he has made a calculation that today there are 1,35,000 crore rupees lying with these registered societies. And they put them into bank accounts where they don't even earn interest. And his calculation is that approximately 50,000 crore rupees are floating around. The banks love it. They don't have to pay interest on it.
So it's just free cash for the bank.
And the accounts people, the audit people say we are not allowed to audit these because they are the monies of a registered society.
Okay.
So in terms of administrative efficiency, in terms of accountability, in terms of responsibility, this whole system is a disaster. And that is why...
Shouldn't it be dismantled therefore?
We don't have to dismantle it. I want to say, let us put in place an alternative to last-minute delivery. Instead of registered societies and babus, let's bring in what the Constitution is decreed and what the political will is created, which is 32 lakh elected representatives and 2.5 lakh institutions of government. You bring them into the exercise and give a sense of ownership to people. They'll say that this is my money. It has to be spent properly.
Sure, yeah.
And what I would call
Can we take a small break here? We'll come back in a few seconds. Please don't go and keep watching Rajya Television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are talking to Mr. Mani Shankar Aiyar on some of the seminal recommendations of an expert committee on how to make the panchayat raj system work effectively. Mani, you very rightly said that so much money today are lying with registered societies, essentially lying in banks, 50,000 crore, the amount you quoted, free cash with banks. Now, okay, you're right. The system need not be dismantled completely, but shouldn't we urgently, immediately put in place alternative systems that you have recommended in your expert committee, which is also constitutionally mandated? I mean, how long should this take?
Absolutely. Now, I think
give me a time frame.
I think the problem was really with the bureaucracy. You can't expect politicians to be drawing up detailed activity maps. So
some of the details you have
No, so this time in our report, we took 8 major centrally sponsored schemes. And we produced 8 detailed activity maps which run to 136 pages.
Okay.
But we've shown how it can be done. If we without any bureaucrats available, and with 4 young students and Raghunandan sitting on top of them, is able to produce 146 pages of activity maps. Well, I'm sure the bureaucracy...
For how many schemes you said?
For 8 schemes.
8 schemes.
So we did the activity mapping for funds, functions and functionaries.
Like you mentioned for roads and education earlier.
Well, we haven't done it we did it for the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, for the National Rural Health Mission, for the Sarv Sakshi Abhiyan, for the...
this would include Manrega also?
No, we didn't do Manrega. We did it for the special component plan, the special central assistance for tribal sub-plans. There are 8 of them.
And now what?
So now what? If the government accepts my recommendations, within 2 years, I guarantee to you that we'll be able to radically alter this system. If the government doesn't, then I cannot guarantee that even in 20 years it will happen. But I have demonstrated, my colleagues have demonstrated, that this can be done in a practical way. And since we're coming to the end of the program, I just want to share this with you. I once asked Rajiv Gandhi, how many years will it take for us to translate these constitutional provisions into effective Panchayat Raj? And Rajiv stunned me by saying, oh, a full generation, at least 25 years. But I see that he was far more prescient than me. Now, today is 20 years.
Okay.
I've got another 5 years. We can do it.
5 years
and we've shown how to
time.
do it, to reach that degree, that first generation, 1 generation, 25 years. And I'm sure we can beat Rajiv to it. Now that we have shown how to practically do it.
And Mani, in your report, I noticed you have quoted Prime Minister Manmohan Singh as clearly saying that India's economic reforms have not been followed by critical institutional reforms.
Absolutely.
Now, is Manmohan Singh convinced that this is the institutional reform that we are looking for?
I'm not a psychologist, but I can read and write.
Yeah.
I have about 7 speeches of his, which we have quoted, in which his commitment to Panchayat Raj is clear. What has happened, it seems to me, is that in 1992 February, when Manmohan Singh ji presented his first budget, full budget, that's when economic reform started. And later that same year, these constitutional amendments were passed. So the chariot of progress was to run on 2 wheels, one economic reforms and one grassroots governance reforms. But whereas the economic reforms wheel has run relatively smoothly over 20 years, the grassroots governance reforms wheel has been frequently punctured and occasionally in danger of falling off altogether. What we are saying is, in keeping with Manmohan Singh ji's phrase, which you have just quoted, we should have both the wheels run together. That's the only way we can get inclusive growth. And in a democracy, you cannot have fast and skewed growth. The 12th plan says it's so skewed that whereas in the 11th plan period, our GDP grew at an average rate of just under 8%, the poverty alleviation rate was below 1.5%. Now, this is not the way to go forward. We have to have some measure of equity that both the wheels run properly. And my answer is, we can't do it for income and wealth, but we can do it for all the public goods and services by activity mapping for all centrally sponsored schemes. That will incentivize the states to do the same, and the 14th Finance Commission, which has just been set up, can build on the example of its predecessor.
I was coming to that. How can 14th Finance Commission dovetail some of its own recommendations to match what you have said in this expert committee?
There's no body that can do it easier than the 14th Finance Commission, because the 13th Finance Commission has already shown how. In their terms of reference, the question of local government finances was put in. And their ultimate recommendation meant that approximately 2% of the divisible pool will be earmarked for the panchayats and sent to them directly. Now, what we are recommending is that 2% should be increased to nearer 6% or 7%. Once that happens, there will be an explosion of funds flowing into the panchayats, and he who holds the purse strings is really the strong one. You have in English the saying that he who's going to pay the piper. Now, in that sense, if you make the panchayats much stronger financially, they will also be obliged to raise their own resources. And with that kind of financial autonomy...
You also recommended revenue raising powers to panchayats?
Oh, we've given at very great length. particularly in a chapter that I have written,
That also
how it
center
can be done.
can implement that, right?
We have to ensure that the states ensure that they get the powers to do it. And you give them enough finances, otherwise, for them to be able to raise monies which they retain and use. I give you the example of a veterinary hospital. Now, normally the richest man is the one who will avoid the taxes most.
Yeah.
But if I own 3,000 head of cattle, the biggest beneficiary of the veterinary hospital will be me.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'll pay my share, the others will pay their share. And everybody knows that in paying this tax, we are going to get this particular service.
Sure.
So why should they not pay?
And one more thing, Mani, you invoked Rajiv Gandhi's prediction that will take 25 years, and you said 20 years have gone by, and surely you have 5 years to do it. Do you think this is the right time for the two wheels, as it were, that you spoke about, economic reforms and governance, bottom-up governance, to move together? Because
if they don't move together, Naxalism, which is now evident in Dandakaranya, will become evident all
sure,
over our
I'm on
country.
another point, Mani. It seems also an opportune time in the context of some of the other schemes that the centre is coming up with, like Aapka Paisa Aapke Haath, direct benefit transfer, the Aadhaar scheme, banking access to. I think all these could dovetail together, right?
Of course, DBT can only...
technology can be helpful
absolutely.
in mapping this
We've said everywhere, use e-technology for real-time transfers, real-time receipt of utilization certificates, real-time release of second installments. And don't wait for the state to give you the UC, just get it done at the bottom level. But much more important, I think we need to realize, is that DBT has to be limited to where the transaction is only the money. In other words, a pension or giving a scholarship. But how can you deliver education through DBT? Or how can you deliver drinking water or sanitation through DBT? Therefore, the DBT system
suitability of DBT
is to be an adjunct to the panchayat Raj system.
It's a platform, it's a technology platform.
So both of them have got their respective areas of jurisdiction, and both need to move forward for genuinely inclusive growth. My bottom line is, you cannot get inclusive growth without inclusive governance. In other words, you cannot have equity in our society without Panchayati Raj. And therefore, I recommend, this is now outside my report, I recommend that the next Prime Minister of India should also be the Minister of Panchayat Raj. Only then will the chariot really move forward on two wheels.
Yeah, that's a very interesting recommendation. Mr. Mani Shankar Aiyar, thank you for talking to us, and hoping that in the next 5 years, the remaining objectives are achieved in regard to Panchayati Raj. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back again with another episode soon. Thanks for watching.